Greetings and salutations, my fellow sovereigns. This is Vocational Science Freedom Wednesday Night Open Roundtable, and tonight's discussion is going to be about alternative platforms and Alttec for sharing knowledge. And if you'd like to join the Vocational Science Freedom Gilded server, you can do so by going to the Vocational Science Freedom YouTube page and clicking on the link right here, which is gilded.gg/VSOF. You can also find us on Rumble, Vocational Science Freedom, and you can also find us on Odyssey, which is the main repository for all of the classes. And our Gab group is Gab group 30721. All right, so different discussion tonight. This is about how do we, as a online community, perpetuate redundancy? How do we pick and choose what platforms that we use that will be not censoring us, first and foremost, and second, that we have at least a modicum of control, if not absolute total control, over what we're running. And this includes anything from chat platforms, whole cloud servers, video sharing sites, and anything in between. And I got some information from someone who asked me today regarding the subject, which is kind of what sparked this conversation. He said, have you ever looked into Bastion or into Brighteon.io? And I said, no. And then I looked them both up, and they're precisely the same thing. So Brighteon is obviously Mike Adams, the Health Rangers name brand. And so what it looks like is what he did is it looks like he probably created a server off of the Bastion platform, is what it looks like to me, because obviously these two things are precisely the same. And I think I put these into chat. If not, I'll put them in a chat so we can save them for posterity, because I want to cover all of these different platforms and really take a deep dive into them. And I might even create, because I was talking to Cap about this today, I think I'll probably create a committee for this subject, because it's a constantly changing subject, meaning new people are coming out with better and better things. The other platforms are trying to, a lot of the times, come down harder and harder as far as censorship is concerned. We've certainly, witnessed that with YouTube. The Vocational Science of Freedom itself has been knocked off of Discord twice, which is why we don't use that platform anymore, because we know that it's run by the CCP and has all of its money linked back to the CCP. So what we're looking for, as far as the VSOF is concerned, and this goes for anybody that would be wanting to start or have a online community, is what are the platforms that are best for privacy, total control, and redundancy of information, shared information. Now, peer-to-peer is going to be something that obviously will be very good for redundancy and sharing information, because then obviously everyone who has the documents that someone wants to download, there will always be, hopefully, a computer up and running that will have the file available to download, just the same way that you would do like a BitTorrent type of peer-to-peer connection. That would be fine. I wouldn't have a problem doing that. That'd be great. And then the other option are whole Linux servers, which we could run off our own tower and then run something like what John suggested, which is this Red Hat product, where it appears to be like an open cloud. It's a hybrid cloud base. So you're running it off your own platform, and then you're able to connect other people into it. At least that's what I think this is. And John, if you have any other insight as to how this works, or if I messed up anything in what I just stated, feel free to jump in.
It's just a Linux distribution that it's just an operating system that you can use to run a server. Basically, is about the simplest way I can explain it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Red Hat is basically just a different kind of Windows, and Red Hat specifically was built from the ground up for essentially business and hosting servers. So, as a Linux user goes, if you're interested in playing games, it's generally not what you want to do, but it's got so much like built-in office productivity sort of nonsense, as well as server hosting and things like Kubernetes, and basically your domain authorization packages are pretty much baked into it, much like they are with various versions of Windows. Although Windows lately has actually gotten to a point where they're trying to like subdivide everything up to a point where you have to pay an extra $100 to access those features because, of course that you do. But yeah, honestly, any version of Linux can do anything. So one of my personal favorites for running servers is actually Slackware. You actually have to code everything yourself. You have to compile it yourself. And so packages
But if you know
do
what you're
not.
doing, that's actually a better route, correct?
Yes, but no. And
Okay.
the reason not is because of all of the distros, like Slackware's probably like it does not get updates, but once every year and a half. So it's weak to sort of zero. I mean, there's partially security through obscurity, and then there's also you can't have holes in your doorways if you don't have the fucking doorways to begin with.
That's true.
The problem with that is that being that the internet is sort of the main route that people go through, and we're at a point now where we're wanting to look at distributed systems. So like if we were going to basically like build our own server someplace and host it someplace, like actually someone in the group plugging it into their walls, then I would say, Slackware would be perfectly fine. And with a either a dynamic DNS or a static IP, we could literally just basically do a VSOFonline.com or whatever, and boom, Bob's your uncle. There it is. The problem with that is that one of the things started to do a while back with particularly offensive to the Marxist agenda ideas is they did this Alex Jones, and I know there was somebody else where they actually started going after their DNS hosting. So even though like Alex Jones owns all his own servers, he essentially owns his own data center. He probably has an absolutely massive fat internet pipeline.
You're talking about a DDoS attack, right?
I'm sorry?
You're talking about a DDoS attack, a denial of service based upon hundreds of thousands of computers trying to
that's
jump on the server.
Actually one thing, but that's actually something a little bit different. But
okay.
No, what they're actually talking about is your HostGator, your Namecheap, the places where you actually register, alexjones.com. Those people started to drop him like all of the payment processors and stuff. They're like, we understand that, but we're not going to host your material. We are not going to store and refer to alexjones.com.
So you're saying that there is a way to set up a server, a box, and be able to have your own web hosting site,
so
basically your own website, and not have to buy it from them, right?
Yes, but that's so what you can do is you can dial it up directly using the actual IP address. No one likes doing that. No one knows how to do that.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. I know what you're saying though. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're, we're basically moving into IPv6, which means that your addresses are now going from 127.0.0.1 to, FE, 6 other digits, colon, and then basically 6 groups of 8-digit hexadecimal characters.
Yeah, a bunch of garbage that you'd have to copy and paste every time you wanted to get somewhere. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And so that's what DNS does is you type in alexjones.com and then it goes to the DNS server, which basically looks up the phone number for alexjones.com servers, which is all of your hostname registrars, and then it basically pings them and shoots them back down to you. All of that stuff happens transparently. So we could sort of do it that way. And I might know a guy that might have a little bit of storage space with a server that's always on that might be able to do something like that. But
the risk that you're talking about then is still the routing of the traffic to find your little thing. If they say at some point in time, go fuck yourself, then you basically lose your web name, right?
No, because so it's really sort of weird. The internet is a giant network of nodes. So there's ICANN in Switzerland, which is like the central hub of the master table of the internet, so to speak. And then everywhere else, okay, so like HostGator's one, Namecheap's another.
Is
I
there?
used to know like
I guess I'm so we can get like some sort of visual on this. I've always been rather curious about this. Is there a visual somewhere on the internet that like shows in maybe even a 3D model, but you don't have to worry about trying to find that, but at least something 2D that I could bring up so that not only I can figure out exactly what you're talking about, so that anybody else watching can be like, oh, okay, that's what I understand. I understand it because I can see it. Is there anything like
yeah,
that? Like pictures of,
kind of.
okay.
It all looks like a giant web. So for example, like each of those DNS registrars, right? So typically you will pay one of them, $10 a year or something like that to go register your host name, and then or your URL address specifically, and then it will you punch in whatever the IP address for your servers are, which would either be the IP address you have at your home. You would use your Dyn DNS or dynamic DNS coding, which that's like when you're running a web server out of your home and you don't have the option to go for a static IP. And so
Okay.
it's subject to change at random intervals or whatever. But
And the static IP is really the thing that you're really kind of paying for. Am I correct or am I wrong?
Some of it.
Okay.
It's a clerical accounting sort of bullshit. Basically, the registrar just says it keeps the it's called an A record, as well as the MX record, which is your mailing address. But it's essentially the same stuff you do to set up a website, and all it does is it just says boom. And so, like I've actually done this before with servers that are not hosting HTML traffic, web traffic. You can do this with a server that all it does is send email servers. You can do this with, say, if you happen to have a BitTorrent server that you, for some reason, wanted to have a static IP, you could do it that way. And there's a lot of different little things that quote unquote serve traffic somewhere or from someplace to something that you can basically assign static IPs to. And you're really, IBM Corp, Apple, Google, all those, they've got hundreds or thousands of servers, and they will all do stuff a little bit differently. It's just one of those things that a lot of times you can just have your sort of outward facing stuff assigned with a static public IP address, and then your internal IPs do not matter on the network. They matter to the IT guy that has to fix it. I know all of my mail servers have 198.162.20.
Yeah,
right?
the administrator of whatever system. Yeah, that's all within inside the system.
Yeah.
But instead of
But
the
specifically your public facing IPs, you
the
really only need
yeah.
statics for anything that's outward facing.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Right. And so that's really sort of the key there. And they typically run like 20 to 30 a month for most IPs on top of whatever else your package you're paying for. But my thinking was, as a sort of a mega backup replacement, if we had, say, one or two dedicated servers somewhere at somebody's place that had your master file list, then you could essentially have two seeders on a BitTorrent network, and then for dropping your mega links, and if Mega decides to go offline for some reason, you could basically drop a torrent in. The other thing is there's been a
just for a second, so I can get it through my head as to what you're talking about doing here. So as a redundancy backup, we would have a server which would actually be running as basically a BitTorrent host, if you will, and then people would be literally able to then just use a BitTorrent program like file grabber to download what the information that's there.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, being able to have a redundancy for BitTorrent for files.
So yeah. And so that would basically be like a mega backup. Now, it is more software that people have to install, and BitTorrent is a little bit of a weird thing for most people, like grandmas and boomer type people, to sort of get through their heads. However, it's actually come a really, really long way.
And here's the thing I could do to kind of negate that problem. What I could do is, either with you or whatever, we could create a small instructional video, maybe 5 minutes, and say, this is the program that you want to go download, for BitTorrent grabbing. Yep. And then this is how you easily set it up for the files that we offer here at VSOF, because I don't give a fuck about teaching them how to go grab other torrents. I could care less about that.
Honestly, transmission would be my go-to, because it is a platform agnostic BitTorrent client. It's one of the best out there. It's pretty much default on most Linux systems. It also has
okay, could you drop a link on that into chat, please? And then also drop the link to what was the other thing you just were talking about earlier about the Linux system? You had mentioned another Linux system to run the server off of. I just want to make sure that people have a link to be able to find that as well, as far as being able to do their own research into, like, if they want to do a deep dive into how to get these things set up.
Yeah, so there's transmission with its...
Okay.
And it's... So transmission out of the box on pretty much every... There's been one distro of Linux I installed it on where I had to go in and actually like tweak some settings. Other than that, it pretty much runs out of the box. Okay. It's exceptionally lightweight. So people who don't want to remember how to do it can basically just say accept and, start when my computer starts, and it'll add 0.12 seconds to their boot up load time on a modern machine. And maybe
now is that one specifically specifically for Linux systems? Because I run qBitTorrent, but I'm not running a Linux system. Is this what you just put in the chat specifically what they'd have to do if we ran the server as a Linux server, is what you're saying?
It was developed specifically for OS X and Linux.
Okay.
And then they made a Windows client. And like the Apple philosophy, it is mind-numbingly stupefied.
Okay.
It just works. Okay. And it's stable. And provided that you keep it updated at least for like the major additions, like every time it goes up a number from 1 to 2 to 3, and you never mind the point dot whatever, it'll pretty much work. So that's why I would say, is because this basically dumbs things down as much as possible for pretty much everyone. And then from there, all we would have to do is actually create the torrents to whatever mega folder you wanted to do that, which can also be done fairly easily. And I think transmission can do it. You basically just go into your create torrent, I forget where it is in the settings. It opens up like a save as box. You navigate, you basically click the folder you want, right click, create torrent from this, and bop, there she goes. And the torrent itself is generally like 10 or 20 kilobytes or less. It's just a stupidly small text file. So it would be able to get downloaded. And then basically what you'd want to do is create a magnet link for it.
Right.
Which is a little bit more complicated for whoever's setting up the torrents. But basically all it does is you can just basically use a magnet link, and it will literally transmission. You click the magnet link, transmission will pop open, and it'll say, hey, it says you want to open this. Do you want to open this? You click yes, and then it goes through, and then it'll download in at whatever speed it possibly can, according to the settings set up in transmission and the speed of your IP, the speed of your downloads, as well as the speed of the uploader, which is honestly what we would probably be most dependent upon. and then it's got a nice little ding when the file is done, and so then you would have the folder and all of the materials in it. But considering the average size of most of the folders that are dropped in a classroom, I would say, probably do it like a day ahead of time. Just be like, hey, tomorrow's stuff, we're gonna do this. So here's the torrent link for tomorrow's class, for the folders if you want to download it, and boom, Bob's your uncle, that it'll download. And obviously the more people are seating, the faster it'll go.
So we could save the torrent link or the torrent link into the show notes for every class, so that those that already know how to do this and they're already on the other side of it with us in the community, they don't have to go through all that. They just click on the link and they automatically know what to do, and they can just go grab it.
Pretty much. Now, it would also take up some space on their computer, but it's probably a good thing. And the other thing is, once people, it's like every other file sharing sort of application, much like Mega too, is, if people download the folders to their hard drive, then they can actually recompress them and share them with anyone else. So, depending on how much control you want over the Mega Drive, that's it could take some of that away, but it would actually help distribute the information faster. So, but it's just one of those things. It's not quite as secure or as controllable as the Mega, but it's what it is. And
right. And I'm not so worried about Mega being the issue of redundancy. I'm pretty secure in what Kim.com's doing. Yeah. I mean, he already went to Congress. He already told them to fuck off. They can't get any of the passwords because he says, he clearly told them already, I don't have the passwords. So now it would be a matter of any corporate government jurisdiction wanting to try and get at anything that's on Mega, they would have to send Mega a specific subpoena for a specific account for a specific reason, and it would have to obviously have gone through a court, a show cause hearing. Yeah, well, any court, just at least have a show cause hearing to show what the fuck do they actually want this for. I mean, FISA, as an aside, let's not get into the illegality of that whole bullshit, but somewhere there would have to be a record as to what they put forward as their evidence to justify the warrant. And then, Kim.com and his legal team would be like, well, fuck you, that's not enough. Pretty much. I mean, I don't know how many subpoenas, like, there's probably a record of them somewhere that they've ever actually allowed to go through, but Mega is not my biggest issue. My biggest issue right now is to have something that is like Gilded that we can use as a backup, like a chat program backup, which like I said, there was something we were talking earlier before the class started, and I was trying to remember, there was a Linux-based cloud server type program, and it had cloud in the name, and I don't remember if I talked to you about this before
Open
or
Cloud,
not.
I think
that might have been it. Now, if we can run something like that, which does have kind of this like sort of Gilded-esque capacity to it.
My understanding of Open Cloud is that it's basically the same thing as sort of a Google Drive. It would fall more into the line of the Mega sort of solution. The Gilded style solution is a lot harder to sort of come by, because pretty much anything that involves basically real-time comms is sort of going the way of getting owned by the Khazarian mafia. So the two options that I see, both of which are an incremental pain in the ass, are basically switching over to sort of the Fediverse. Fediverse is basically distributed internet. It's Mastodon. And so Mastodon is part of the Fediverse. I think that was already mentioned up there. And I've played around with some of it years back when I first heard about it, and it was still very new. And
there's only certain things that are a part of that type of network that you just said. And can you explain what that network is?
So,
and by the way, I found the one that we worked too. The one that CLF3 and I worked on that we actually had a server up and running was called Nextcloud, and I just found the link to it because I remembered the icon. So this is what we were running off of the Linux server when we were playing around with it, and it worked just fine off of just kind of a high level internet capacity, pipe. We weren't running on fiber or something, but when we get this set up, I would very much like to have a dedicated fiber to it for it to do that. I will gear it up as it goes along, just like any other, proper thing that you want to build. Now, this Nextcloud thing, I do remember that there were types of usages for it that were very much like Gilded already. And yeah, like you can kind of see it here, sort of. That's probably a bad picture. Where there's different, you have all the contacts, and then there's chat functions, and there's all these functions up top here. I know this is really tiny. Nobody can probably see what this is in this tiny little picture, but I just remember playing around with it and stating to myself, okay, this could work if we could just kind of boost it up, get it a little bit bigger, make sure that the server was secure and get it on a bigger pipe, and make sure that it wasn't going to get, whacked by a DDoS or some other idiot hackers trying to get in, whatever. But I think this is a good option, at least until I hear of a better one, or we can come across something that you feel is something akin to this, where we can have this gilded kind of platform. Because you can't really get away from, or I don't want to get away from on any level, the interconnectedness with what Gilded allows us to do: have calls, share files, this kind of thing. It's important, and to be secure, because obviously everybody has to go through the application process before they get in here. So they're pretty well vetted. Are there some agents in here?
It is
maybe
an enterprise solution, so it's going to have a lot of your sort of domain access control sort of regulations sort of baked into it. So basically, the way the main internet works these days is primarily you have some central authority, generally referred to as a server, and then you have your clients who basically come up and say, please, sir, may I have another? And then the server basically checks them according to the credentials that they may or may not have, and then serves it out to them. And this is basically everything that the internet works on. So your HTML servers operate this way.
If you're looking at my screen, this is pretty much what you were describing, or pretty much what you're talking about here. What I've got up on my screen.
So yeah, this is for your DNS resolution.
Okay.
Right. And so you've got basically on the left-hand side, you've got stuff on your computer. If your computer is part of an organization, that first box all the way on the left, the email client, the web browser, is pretty much invisible and does not exist in real life. It would operate generally in levels 5 and 7 on the OSI model of internet traffic, which is basically, it's the application layer. It's all make-believe magic sparks from a rock scientists figured out how to flatten and store lightning in. And then your computer is actually, your knock on wood box. And then the caching forwarding resolver is either going to be your machine or your router. And then it basically pings out in between the caching forwarding resolver and the recursive resolver. You would have a great big sphere called the internet that it transmits through. And there can be a lot of bounces in between there. And then your recursive resolver is what you have on the other side. When you talk to an organization, when you dial up IBM.com or Apple.com, those are massive organizations, and they do not have just one web server. They might have one address, but its stuff is being served from multiple servers inside it. And so that recursive resolver is basically their routers on the other side that basically say, okay, they actually look at the type of traffic that's coming in, and they say, okay, well, you are an HTML page request coming in on port 80, so we're going to basically ping you over here to our web serving master network, and then it will basically go from there to another smaller router that figures out which actual machine has the information you're looking for, and then it'll find it, capture it, and copy it, and send it to you. And then it goes all the way back to the left side of the chain on your machine, where it gets stored in some temporary files, and then whipped up through Google Chrome or Firefox or, God forbid, Microsoft Edge.
Right.
But that's pretty much how it works. But this happens for everything, from web traffic to email traffic, even all of your gaming network stuff like Discord and Guilded operate the same sort of way. Once upon a time, there was some other services. I know TeamSpeak was one, Mumble was another one. They weren't as fleshed out as Discord was. They
Yeah.
were primarily voice chat and voice chat only.
Yep. I remember some of them. Yeah. TeamSpeak, I definitely have been on TeamSpeak before, and yeah, it was very, very basic.
Yeah, but it is a basic server, and the nice thing is, the bandwidth for a typical audio track is something like 20 megabits, especially if you're using something like Ogg Vorbis, the compression codec, or FLAC, or even an MP3 as your sort of audio compression file. You can actually shrink that down quite a bit. So, considering we typically get maybe a dozen people actually talking and sharing, you really, a dozen times 20 megabits is not horrible. So you need a couple of hundred megabits of bandwidth, which is, for trying to host on a home machine, it can be asking a lot. Like, the business up in our area is pretty pitiful. It's like 3 megabits or something like that. It's what do. As far as the rest, sort of the forums, that's something that can sort of be solved a number of other different ways. So, I mean, like,
yeah, and like the next cloud capacities for that was definitely in there. There was definitely forum pages. There were places where you could save files. I kind of wish that I could sort of find something that makes it look a little bit more. Okay, so here's like the calendar, and then the Nextcloud files. This is the file sync, so you can have file syncs with people. And then the talk capacity was, obviously you could talk, but it also had video chat capacity as well. So it does have the same thing as Guilded. So I don't know. I'm just thinking like Nextcloud might be the easiest thing to do. Then all we have to do is focus on boosting the up and down for wherever we're going to drop it, and making sure that it has some sort of aspect of protections that the only people that get in there are the ones that have already been vetted, probably through at least Guilded first and through me and whatnot.
Nextcloud would probably be pretty good with that, because like I said, it's designed to basically be a Slack competitor. Essentially, your tech startup programming teams up to date with what everybody else is doing.
Which is exactly what we're doing, what we're using with Guilded. We're not really using it for anything else anyway, other than those things to keep everybody up to date as to what we're doing as far as law and as far as who's serving what where, how'd that go, so on and so forth, and having our meetings.
Yeah.
Which is why and then I make sure that we just put it up on the video sharing platforms, which video sharing platforms I feel like I'm pretty good on. If we ever get knocked off of YouTube again, okay, fine, but I don't post everything onto YouTube anymore. I pretty much post everything onto Rumble for the most part, but I don't have the rest of the archives. The total archives of everything that I've ever done and everything that I've ever posted is on Odyssey. And that's going to stay there as long as Odyssey stays there. So this Bastion thing looks kind of interesting, but what I don't want to end up doing is ending up trying to run like 2 or 3 servers at the same time. That's pointless, because not only is it's just too much time, but everything's going to be spread out all over the place.
So that's actually kind of already what's happening. It's just we have programs such as Discord and Guilded that basically make it all nice and compact and seamless between each other. To really embrace the Alttec, that's sort of what you would have to do. The Mastodon, Matrix, the Fediverse, they are part of the new wave of Alttec that's basically trying to distribute everything. So
okay, how do you spell that? Feta? Is it
FEDI verse?
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to look at. Because, I've seen this. Okay, the Fediverse party. This was what I was looking for. This fucking thing. I remember seeing this before. Okay, so Mastodon's part of it. Plorma,
so
Dystopia.
is Matrix. Matrix is a federated sort of gilded replacement.
What was that you just said? Make sure you put a link in for that, because that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. Something that would be in the Fediverse, but would take over our situation of what we have on Gilded. No matter how long it takes, I don't give a shit. As long as it's going to be secure and we know that we cannot get kicked off of it. That's what I'm looking for. So make sure you put a link to that into chat real quick. And then talk about the rest of what is on the Fediverse as well, if you will.
All right, links have dropped. So matrix.org, it is, I don't know how long ago you started using Discord. Matrix is, when I last was on it, was rougher than the roughest version of Discord I'd ever seen, which is well before Gilded even got started. It is quite possibly one of the worst. Now, it is locked down tighter than a nun's asshole. It is like fully encrypted. It's basically like you have to have like a BitTorrent invitation to basically do anything. Everything is like end-to-end encrypted.
Okay, that's a
Share
really good
keys.
thing, because I think as we move forward and the mob continues to push their global communist agenda, let's put it that way, for total takeover and new world order type shit, they're going to be cracking down harder and harder on every single aspect of everyone that is on any platform that they can do anything about. And
Yep.
It seems to me that this party that they've got going on here seems to be one of the best alternative go fuck yourself, you can't get to me type scenarios, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And so I believe a transition to these things on the Fediverse and everything else that we're talking about, setting up a Linux server and all this other stuff, in the next 10 years, 20 years, is going to be the only places where true people that are never going to give up their freedom are going to congregate. And we should get there first so that we have a nice, strong voice in these locations. That's what I feel personally.
Yes, it is. It's also a pain in the ass to use. I had some difficulties with some of the things on there, and I am allegedly some kind of tech guru, or has been in the past. It is a pain to set up. A lot of your boomers that had difficulty setting the clock on the VCR will probably never ever be able to make it to that place. Fortunately, most of them are dead or in nursing homes, and
it's okay. I mean, as every generation passes on and the next one comes in, the fight changes. This is now an information war, and those that are in the greatest fight are now Generation
get to
X.
the actual difficult parts of it, because part of the difficulty with this is basically everything requires like an encrypted invitation to get to know somebody. You have to basically exchange crypto keys with people. And if I talk to Al and then I meet Bob, and then eventually sometime later I start chatting with Charlie, and then Charlie's a real like tinfoil hat paranoid bastard that basically requires me to sort of reset my crypto keys every so often to sort of keep up with him, then Al and Bob, who I've already had conversations with, were sometimes have like we would lose the ability to communicate until they went ahead and basically updated, refreshed their crypto keys. And the last time I was using it was not quite so simple as like, go to your friend's page and just click the little refresh sort of button over to the right. It was a little bit more involved than that.
Is it like that now? Have they simplified it?
I haven't used it in a minute. I stopped using it because it was such a pain in the ass.
Okay, so maybe what we'll do is we'll just let like the Fediverse maybe develop a little bit more, get a little bit more user friendly before we bother to mess with it.
Thinking. The other thing with the Fediverse is, from my understanding, is like a lot of the stuff sort of operated like torrents and tokenering, where there's a lot of information flowing around that is sort of available Like it's not available to everyone, but it actually passes through everyone, which means there's more data flowing around than there realistically needs to be, than there would be in a sort of a master slave client server system. In the master slave client server setup, the only system that really needs hardware is the server. That's generally going to be the richer party who can afford it, and it's generally going to be much easier for them to accomplish, as well as over engineer. With the Fediverse, because a lot of the stuff was passing through sort of everybody, every weak link would slow you down somewhat. So if you've got some bastard that's like, way out where the banjos start playing and dueling with each other, and they're on 6 megabit DSL, your chat room can really crash. The nice thing about the Fediverse is you can sort of include or exclude whoever you want, but just because we might piss off the ACLU or whatever the tranny advocacy organization of the day is, they could be like, you guys are not on our page and we're going to ban you. And all that means is that you can't find our chat rooms and stuff from their portion of the Fediverse. However, if you go on the Alex Jones side, then they could absolutely distribute our stuff around. And because of the levels of encryption on the stuff, it should be safe from most people shy of some serious quantum computing decryption
Sure.
methods that are out there.
And they'd got to have a reason to look anyway. So,
But yeah, other than that, it is going into the Fediverse means that you basically need a whole new set of tools for everything. It's really where we sort of are, right? So you would have something like transmission, a torrent for your file sharing stuff. You would have something like Matrix for your chat stuff. Matrix did have some voice functionality, but it was basically somewhere between crippled and broken when I was last there. And I am not currently aware of any serious voice chat stuff on the Fediverse.
I think either Nextcloud or Red Hat for a server might be the best way to start. What I'd like to be able to do is at least by the end of the year have something up and running where we can all test it out.
Have backups.
Yeah, we can test it out. Everybody's cool with it. We figured out how to run it. We're playing around with it, and we're just kind of goofing around and seeing what we can push it to do. That way we can test our bandwidth. We can test how many people bounce in and out on it. We can do some calls and see how it works. And if that plays out, then we can start thinking about other things about what else could be added to the Nextcloud server, and or even figure out, I don't know if Nextcloud, I don't think Nextcloud would support an online store.
Federated system, no.
Yeah, or even not a federated system either, but yeah. Or what I'm eventually wanting to do is being able to get to an online store so that everybody that is a member of the VSOF can put up their own advertisements and say, look, this is what I have to offer. And we then exchange proper consideration, gold and silver, between us in our own alt economy. Alt as in what the economy should be based upon natural law and the common law, and be able to pull more and more people into it and say, look, if you're sick and tired of the Federal Reserve notes, if you're sick and tired of this, come join this community, this alternate economy community that only uses gold and silver, of which we literally pay each other in gold and silver. There's nothing that can be grabbed. There's nothing that can be stolen. There's nothing that can be acquired. There's no single place where everybody's wealth is. The wealth is in the distribution of every member of the group. That's what I want to do, because then it's impossible for anyone to come in and pull one string and everything falls apart. Can't do that.
That's literally what the Fediverse is all about.
Yeah. It just seems overly complicated for what I want to do. I want to keep that.
Unfortunately, in order to make things distributed, that's just what has to be done. The other solution that I possibly had and maybe this is just snide and sarcastic. We could basically make everything as sarcastic as possible and claim to be some kind of communists that have gone so extreme that we've actually come all the way back over to the far right
Yeah,
side.
it's funny you bring something like that up as far as a comical way of communication. There was, and for whatever reason, I've been going back and relaxing and watching old episodes of Star Trek Next Generation. Anyway, there was this funny episode where they ran into this group of people who they communicated by metaphor. And I was like, shit, wouldn't that be interesting to start talking like that between each other? I mean, in a sense, we do this already here, sort of. Like if you were walking down the street and or like say we were all in a group on the street and we all started to talk to each other and said, yeah, have you served your KW yet? No one else that wasn't part of our group would have any fucking idea what you were talking about. None. Zero. And I kind of like it that way because then there's no communication. You can literally just type in KW instead of having to type out the whole big long name of that particular status doc. And even that's short for something. It's short for kill warrant. What does that mean? Nothing. It was just a name. So it's all based on a contraction of a metaphor, which again, if you aren't here, doesn't mean anything. Well, funny thing like that to what you just described is kind of how I would feel that would go. A lot of it would be metaphor. Some of it would just be absolute stupidity. It would mean that literally a bunch of it could be the absolute opposite of what it means. We call it communist central. What it really means is, common law central, like total freedom central, whatever. And create something like that where, yeah, we would know what the hell it meant, but nobody else who wasn't a member of the group would, even if they started looking into it. That to me would be funny. And it would make us certainly unique. And I think a lot of people would get a kick out of it. And it would also keep intellectually bankrupt people out of here, which I'm perfectly fine with. Because I've told people a long time ago, I am not doing this work to try and wake up sheep. I am not doing this work to get approval from sheep. I'm not even doing this work to even find sheep. I don't even want to talk to them. They can stay in the pasture. I don't care. I'm not trying to even cut the barbed wire of their fence. Honestly, I don't care. I'm looking for the lions that jumped over the fence and want to come, hunting. That's what I'm looking for. And it takes a certain high level of intellect to be here. Honestly, most people, I figure a lot of people can't even get past the idea of joining the Gilded server. If they do, they're kind of confused when they get here. They're like, oh, I don't know how to run this thing, man. And then they just don't do anything else. Okay, fine, great. I don't have to spend, hours and hours and hours on end explaining something to you that you could have simply gone and watched a YouTube video for 20 minutes and completely learned how to operate. It's laziness. Sorry. It's fucking laziness. Now, this Fediverse thing seems a little bit more than just an aspect of laziness. It does seem like a serious investment of time to learn how to do it. Okay, I'd be cool with that for certain circumstances or based upon that, like I said, in the next 10 years, I think a lot of this is going to go towards things like the Fediverse and other ways that people will come up with that we haven't even, figured out yet or heard of yet or haven't developed yet to keep us private, separate, and making sure the cocksuckers aren't violating the 4th and 5th Amendment. And we're going to be developing these things as we go along because there are not that many communities out there that are like us. One, there are not that many communities out there that even have the slightest idea what they're talking about in law. I could name off a bunch of, but I won't. But there's endless amounts of these gurus and people that think they know what they're talking about that have all ended up here. And I've heard dozens of different kinds of stories, meaning I've heard of dozens of different kinds of gurus, not of all which I put up in warnings in the announcement section of the server. But it's because people do not take the time, or maybe they just don't feel it's necessary. I don't know. Maybe they're looking for a silver bullet. I don't know. But most people are just simply intellectually bankrupt. And I completely also understand the aspect of Pareto's rule, which is very few people in any system will do most of the work. I totally get that. I also understand that only 20% of the population has critical thinking capacity in their brain anyway. True fact. And then I'm also aware of the fact that there might be up to 1% or more biological psychopaths out here that are and have created the vast majority of the systems which are keeping everybody absolutely stupid. They don't even know that they're dumb. And of course, that goes to that famous quote from Goethe that said that none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free. Also a big part of the problem. So I'd like to try and implement as much of this as we feel someone who falls within those parameters, let's put it that way, of what I was just speaking about could easily get done, or would maybe have to take an afternoon or a little bit longer to figure out and then be able to get it done. Yes, by the way, that's the episode. Hilarious. And very interesting about what we're talking about too, as far as being able to speak and talk in metaphor when no one else has any idea what you're talking about. Because as a silly episode, if you don't know who Darmok is, which is the hilariousness and the kind of the joke of the name of the episode in and of itself, that you have no idea what they're talking about. And I think somebody made a reference, like in the writing of the TV show, it'd be like saying Juliet on the balcony. If you don't know who the fuck Juliet is, you have no idea what you're talking about. But you say that to someone who has read Shakespeare, or at least gone and seen the play, and they get a sense of what you're saying. Okay, cool. That to me is interesting. And it's also very interesting to me as a standpoint of how quickly one could create their own language and be completely separate from damn near everybody else around, but make perfect sense and still be, in a sense, speaking English. But really, you're not. You're conveying thought through a completely encrypted way of speaking. So is there anything that anyone else had that they wanted to add as far as either a suggestion for a platform or anything that Cap was talking about tonight or brought up, or that I brought up? Because we're getting close to about an hour now.
I think a good question or survey to maybe run would be to ask people sort of what their pain tolerance is for stress, difficulty, and
okay, that's a good idea. Sure,
setting stuff up. I mean,
okay,
like, are people willing? Because here's the thing that I think it might actually be worthwhile to dig up some old code and try to set up like a TeamSpeak server someplace. And if we could basically set up our own, have a backup.
Yes, it should be part of joining the VSOF. And again, CLF3 and I tried to do this a long time ago. We kind of got some people on, but when we do that, because I think we should do it, is to make a very simple video about how to join,
a checklist of what you need to do,
and walk people through it. But then the only way that they get in is if they get through the application process or whatever other filter that we do in order for them to get the final key. But otherwise they would be able to watch the video and go, oh, this, I just have to install this. Oh, okay. And then I go here and I plug that in there, and then, okay, I just do that. And then, okay, bam. And it's all in a handbill, which obviously the VSOF is pretty well known for having good handbills. As long as we have a handbill for TeamSpeak along with the video, sorry, anybody that can't follow that, I don't want them anyway. Seriously.
Well, it probably also helps building pyramids if you've got some actual trained and skilled stonemason supervisors there to sort of manage all of the knuckle draggers that show up. But
that's true, and the knuckle draggers can definitely be in their own spot. I don't mind that. They can commingle with each other, and every once in a while one of them has a really good idea. It's fine. I don't have a problem with that either. And they should feel like someplace happy to come to that actually is free, meaning we're all about freedom here, right? We're about understanding our common law and natural law rights. And yeah, people should have a place to go to be included in being an American like that, and not have to worry that Google or some Khazarian mob piece of shit is going to just turn off their channel tomorrow. I think that's important. So yeah, TeamSpeak would definitely be something to be able to do like that.
That way we would at least have voice comms as sort of a backup. Streaming might take a little bit of a, but again, with more preparation, you can sort of set the videos up and be like, okay, this is where we're going to go, and please make sure you're buffered and ready because we are starting in 3, 2, 1. Everybody click.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I think I still have my TeamSpeak software. I might even have some of the encryption stuff for it still saved, because it wasn't all that long ago when we were running this thing. I know there's a lot of glowies that have obviously tried to infiltrate 4chan and various different levels and 8chan and whatnot. But it's funny that the frogs always basically find them out and then dox them, and then they just disappear, which is hilarious. So that kind of thing can also happen here too, and should happen here within our own setup of whatever we're doing. That anytime that we find somebody even starts to glow funny, they just get booted instantaneously. And or if they start to violate any of the rules of the server. Now, I have very clear rules set up for the server, and they're not difficult to follow on the VSOF. And when everybody gets here, I demand that everybody fucking read them, because they're not that long. It's very simple. There's only 11 of them. As long as we keep these rules in check, any troll that's going to come in there, anybody that's glowing, is instantaneously going to probably break 4 or 5 of these things right off the bat, and then continue to keep doing it. And so we just automatically know, oh, you didn't follow the rules. I don't give a shit who you are. Bye. And you get booted. And so a clear admin procedure will keep it clean from, fools like that, at least as best as we can. Now, if we start getting up to, 200,000-300,000 people, well, okay, then they're going to be more like, doing other things. But that bridge can be crossed when we come to it. John, I just took a look and opened up Brax Me. Looks like, is this it's another platform, or it's it looks like another platform.
It's an app that you can download on your phone, but each person has their own encryption key. So when you're communicating, you're communicating encryption to encryption.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the way a lot of things are going right now. Matrix is a lot more like PGP, or now GPG. That used to be pretty good privacy, and then somebody bought it, and so he just took the code, forked it, and made it GPG. But basically, there's like a public key that you have to be able to decode stuff on your machine, and then you also have different encryption keys. You have a sort of an encryption key as well as a decryption key that are separate between every 2 people on the server. And that was actually some of the problems that we were running into, is like if somebody's keys were scrambled and needed to be updated, then which would happen pretty much anytime someone new joined the server, then what would happen is basically all they would get is encrypted gobbledygook garbage on their screen. And so that was one of the main reasons why I was like, man, this is kind of a pain in the ass.
It's not like it's that big of a deal as far as what we're doing. We can stay gray and stay user-friendly enough that pretty much everybody with a good intellect can get here. But user-friendly, not so much to the extent that anybody that just simply doesn't have an attention span or just wants to, cry that they have to do 3 or 4 steps to learn something, it knocks out all those people right away, which is great. And that's exactly what I want. Something a little bit more, if we got black and we got white and we got gray in the middle, something a little bit darker than middle gray would be where I'd want to shoot for, if that makes sense.
What do you think about like the Kodi platform? I know it's kind of limited on what you could do, but if you wanted to see
the media streaming service on Linux. Oh,
right.
I was not aware that could do any sort of file sharing or like voice comms or anything like that. I just only know Kodi as that's how you play videos on my server on the other side of the living room.
No, but it would give a fairly secure, like a video sharing platform.
What was it called?
KODI.
Okay.
Because you could set up multiple servers and share repositories with people. They can install the repositories. If it got shut down, then you open up another repository. If that got shut down, open up another one. And that way you could always have access to the videos, or make it hard for people that aren't in like the gilded server. They wouldn't even have the repository to be able to stream the videos.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, so I know Cody has the capacity to basically I can stream stuff on my media server basically anywhere in the world, but I don't know how one the access control I would argue would be suspect on that. And I don't know how to make it so that it could sort of fulfill any sort of drop-in replacement for Streamlabs or Discord or whatever. It's really just a multimedia center package. It used to be an operating system, and much like Ubuntu Studio was downgraded into just a major package that you can install on most Linux distros.
Okay. Yeah, because I think somebody gave me a connection to their private server. I don't know if this was the exact software that they were running. It kind of looks the same though. Like
it's
these,
quite possibly. It is exceptionally common. Like I know so many people. Like I currently do not have it because I'm basically only running one computer at home, but I do have a Kodi remote on my phone, even though I no longer run the software.
right? Yeah, because I was connected with somebody and they had a lot of movies. I think they had something like, I don't know, 10 gigs or something, or maybe no, sorry, not 10 gigs. I mean 10 terabytes of data.
Stuff.
Yeah, stuff, right? And all you had to do was you'd click in. You'd have the application on your computer. You'd click in, and you'd actually be accessing his hard drive. But it would show things like this, like it would show what the Kung Fury picture looks like as you click on the movie, and it had all of that in it. So that is what it was, and it worked fairly well. It's just all that this thing is dependent upon, from my understanding, was up and down. Like if you had a huge up and down, you could run this no problem, and we could just simply bypass every fucking video sharing platform that we wanted to. However, that's not why I'm on the video sharing platforms. Anyway, I'm on the video sharing platforms that people use to promote the understanding of the knowledge and to get people to
try to wake people up.
Yeah, to click on it and go, oh, that's where I can go learn about that. Because once you get here, yeah, of course you can learn anything you want to, and we have the biggest repository of law books out of any group I've ever known of, because every single person and mentor that I've ever had, I've collected every single book and all the repository and all the information. So now I am at the height of having more than anybody else has, because it's the culmination of everybody else's stuff. So that's not a problem. Obviously, we have that. No one else is ever going to be able to challenge us as far as what we have capacity here for sharing. What we give away for free is 10 times more than what all the other groups, I would say, combined have people pay for. All you have to do is just join the Gilded server to get most of that. Or 1-year membership to the VSOF gets you into the VSOF online library, which is, there's so much on that. You couldn't even go through all that in a lifetime. So to that aspect of what we can do and what we need to do and what we need to keep teaching as far as what these subjects are and law and all the rest of the aspects of the VSOF, it's all really going to come down to the capacity of the VSOF council members, of which 3 of you guys are here tonight, and doing the organization within the committees that get people to then boost the knowledge of what the VSOF teaches, expanding out the alternative economy, which I think is going to be something really critical here sooner than I want it to be, and setting up all the rest of these alternative platforms so that people know that we're serious and that they can feel safe, being here instead of getting axed. So, and with that, called wraps for the night. So, all right. So thanks everybody. Thanks you guys for coming. Obviously, thanks for showing me all of these different platforms, and I will keep in touch with everybody about this and post what we find in the VSOF council room, obviously, and what we decide upon, we will then put into announcements on the VSOF server. So thanks everybody for coming. This has been the Vocational Science of Freedom Wednesday night open roundtable, and tonight's discussion was on Alttec and ways to be redundant in your information and to get to places where they can't ever take down your information. So with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your week. And until next time, as always, stay safe and stay sovereign.